There's a moment in every small town when time stops, when something buried deep, something forgotten, decides it can't stay quiet any longer. In the summer of 2024, in the outskirts of Holcomb County, Nebraska, a team of construction workers began demolishing an abandoned barn. It was routine work, a county project to clear unsafe structures. But what happened next would open a door that had been locked for 50 years. And behind it was a secret the town had buried. Literally, the old Jennings barn sat on a rise of land off County Route 6, its frame eaten by rain and time. For years, locals said it was haunted. Kids dared each other to go near it after dark, but few ever did. By July, the county ordered it torn down. A local crew from Carter and Sons Construction was hired for the job. They brought heavy machinery, a backhoe, and portable floodlights. The demolition began just after dawn. The first day went smooth. Half the roof removed, rusted panels and wooden beams stacked neatly to the side. But on the second day, something changed. Just before noon, one of the workers, 38-year-old Paul Jennings, paused his machine after hearing something odd. He described it later as a sound, like air moving under the floorboards. At first, he thought it was wind. Then he heard a voice. Paul, in his recorded interview, said, "It wasn't just air. It was like someone was whispering from under my feet. I thought maybe an animal was trapped. But the words, it sounded like words." Jennings stopped the machine and got down on his knees, pressing his ear against the cracked boards. He said he could hear what sounded like a woman's voice, low, strained, barely there, repeating one word, "Return." The rest of the crew laughed at first. Old barns make strange noises. But when Jennings called over his foreman, they all heard it, faint but real. The men pried up one of the floorboards, expecting to find an old pipe, a burrowing animal, something ordinary. What they found was a hollow cavity filled with dirt and bone fragments. Within minutes, the county sheriff's department had cordoned off the area. What began as a demolition was now a potential crime scene. Sheriff Dale Pritchard arrived that afternoon. He'd lived in Holcomb County all his life, and when he heard the address, he knew exactly where they were digging. Sheriff Pritchard said in an interview, "Jennings Farm. Lord, I hadn't heard that name in decades. The Reverend and his daughter, Lena, they disappeared back when I was a kid." Investigators began removing soil beneath the barn, carefully collecting bone fragments, bits of cloth, and a rusted silver chain tangled in the dirt. Attached to it was a small, heart-shaped locket. The initials engraved on it were clear despite the corrosion. L.J. The sheriff went silent when he saw it. L.J. Lena Jennings. The Jennings family were once the heart of Holcomb County. Reverend Harold Jennings led the local parish, a quiet but respected man known for his stern sermons, and his daughter's gentle voice in the choir. Lena disappeared one winter evening in 1974. Her father reported her missing after she failed to return from choir practice. Weeks later, the Reverend himself vanished. No struggle, no note, no body. The farm was left abandoned. Police searched the area but found nothing. The town moved on, or tried to. The parish closed within a year. The barn was left to rot, its wood splintering like a wound that never healed. Back at the crime scene, the state forensic team began their analysis. The bones appeared human, at least 2 individuals. Preliminary dating placed them between 40 and 60 years old. DNA testing would take weeks, but everyone in Holcomb already knew what they'd find. "We always said that barn was cursed. Mama told me the Reverend used to dig there at night, whispering his sermons to the dirt." By the second day, the excavation revealed something else. A brick outline beneath the floorboards, like the foundation of a cellar that had been filled in. The workers exposed a section of it and found a trapdoor, sealed shut with iron nails. On its surface, scratched into the wood, were 3 words. Investigators attempted to open the hatch, but the wood was fused from decades of moisture and rot. When they finally pried it loose, a rush of stale air poured out, smelling of soil, mold, and something faintly metallic. The chamber below was small, barely the size of a closet. Inside, they found 3 objects: a rusted lantern, a leather-bound notebook, and a single wooden cross, its base darkened as though burned. The notebook was water-damaged, but most of its writing was still legible. It bore the initials H.J., Reverend Harold Jennings. The entries were dated between 1971 and 1974. The final line read, "The ground hums again. I've buried what must not be found. Lord, forgive me." The notebook sparked immediate questions. Why had the Reverend been burying things beneath his barn? And what was humming in the ground? State records showed no seismic activity, no known gas pockets, nothing that could explain the strange vibrations that workers claimed to feel beneath their boots. Still, one report in the county archives stood out. A weather log from 1974 noting unusual subsurface tremors in the area surrounding the Jennings farm. It was never investigated. Until now. As night fell, the forensic team packed up their equipment. Most of the workers refused to stay after dark. But Paul Denning lingered. He said he couldn't shake the feeling that the barn was still making that noise, that whisper. It's faint, but you can feel it, not just hear it, like the ground has a heartbeat. The next morning, he didn't show up for work. His truck was found parked on the edge of the property. Door open, keys still in the ignition. Footprints led from the truck toward the field, then stopped. No signs of a struggle. No tracks leading away. Just the empty, flattened soil, where the barn once stood. By week's end, the Jennings property was sealed off entirely. County officials called in the State Bureau of Investigation. Among the new team assigned to the case was Dr. Eleanor Shaw, a forensic archaeologist, specializing in soil acoustics, and Agent Miriam Cole, a federal investigator, with a reputation for uncovering rural cold cases. Together, they began the long process of piecing together what had really happened on that farm and why the ground beneath the barn still seemed to remember, because in Holcomb County, some things never stay buried. Next time, we'll go back to 1974, to the night Lena Jennings vanished, and the secret her father tried so hard to keep. Every mystery has a starting point, a night when everything begins to unravel, when the pieces of an ordinary life start to fall quietly out of place. For Holcomb County, that night was January 22nd, 1974, the last night anyone saw Lena Jennings alive. She was 19 years old, a choir singer, caretaker to her widowed father, and the only child of Reverend Harold Jennings. Locals described her as kind, quiet, and deeply faithful. But beneath that calm surface, Lena was carrying something she couldn't share. According to the journals later found in the barn, she had been writing about hearing sounds under the church and seeing her father walk the fields late at night, alone, lantern in hand, talking to someone she couldn't see. The evening began like any other. The choir had just finished rehearsal. The Reverend locked the parish doors behind them, and Lena began her walk home, half a mile down the dirt road, toward the family farmhouse. It was cold that night, the kind of cold that makes the ground hard and hollow beneath your boots. Neighbors later testified they saw the lantern from the Jennings porch still burning after midnight. But by morning, both the lantern and Lena were gone. The first to notice was the Reverend. He reported his daughter missing just after sunrise. Deputies searched the nearby fields but found nothing. Her winter coat hung neatly on its peg, her shoes by the door. Only her small silver bracelet, the one engraved with her initials, was missing. When questioned, Reverend Jennings said he believed Lena had run away. But his statement was strangely detached, almost rehearsed. The sheriff's report from that morning reads, "Subject exhibits calm demeanor, limited emotional response. Stated his daughter had been troubled by voices in recent weeks. Those voices became central to the investigation. According to friends, Lena had mentioned hearing sounds coming from beneath the church floor. Not just creaks or echoes, but something that seemed alive. She told me it sounded like someone praying down there, over and over. But when she told her father, he said the church has always had a soul. That line would haunt investigators for decades. The church has always had a soul. For the next 2 weeks, volunteers searched the woods, fields, and nearby riverbanks. They found no sign of Lena. But the story didn't end there, because on the 10th day, a farmer named Jacob Miller reported hearing a scream near the old barn. When deputies arrived, they found Reverend Jennings standing in the field, covered in mud, his lantern broken at his feet. He told officers he was praying for the return of his daughter. But when asked what had happened to the ground around him, the strange sinkhole forming where he stood, he said only this: "The earth knows her name." A week later, Reverend Jennings vanished. His truck was still parked beside the parish. His Bible left open on the pulpit to the book of Ecclesiastes. A single verse was underlined twice in red ink. "That which is buried shall be brought forth, and nothing hidden that shall not be known." Holcomb County lost its pastor that night, and whatever faith it had left with him. The parish was boarded up within a year. And the Jennings farm, once known for its harvest festivals and choir gatherings, slowly became the place everyone in town avoided. When investigators reopened the case in 2024, the original audio from the 1974 search was reanalyzed. Static, wind, and the crunch of boots on frost. And then, buried deep in the background noise, faint whisper, "Female. Return it." The voice matched archived samples of Lena Jennings' choir recordings. But experts were divided. Could her voice have imprinted on the original reel? Or had the tape itself absorbed sound from the environment, from the soil it was recorded on? To the Bureau's forensic team, it didn't matter which was true. Either explanation pointed to one chilling idea: that the ground beneath the Jennings property was somehow remembering. Dr. Eleanor Shaw's field notes described this moment as the first pattern of resonance. The soil in Holcomb County wasn't just rich with minerals. It was geologically unique. A layer of silt and limestone capable of storing vibration, almost like a natural recording medium. If the Reverend had discovered that, it might explain why he spoke of confessions to the earth. But it doesn't explain Lena's disappearance, nor the human remains found 50 years later under the barn, because the DNA tests would soon confirm what the sheriff had already suspected. The bones found under the Jennings barn belonged to 2 different people. Neither was Lena. The first set of remains belonged to an adult male, approximately 45 years old, consistent with Reverend Harold Jennings. The second remained unidentified, but the forensic team believed it was female, young, possibly one of the Miller twins, who vanished the same winter as Lena. When Dr. Shaw examined the site, she noted that the soil around the bones had fused differently, compressed as if by sudden uneven pressure, almost like the ground itself had swallowed them. That's when locals began to whisper again, that the barn was built on hollow ground. In old Holcomb folklore, hollow ground wasn't just a place. It was a kind of curse, a spot where guilt sank deeper than roots, and where the dead refused to stay still. The Reverend had warned his congregation to avoid it. He said some land remembers sin, and when you disturb it, it disturbs you back. But if that's true, what had the Jennings family done to make the ground remember them? 50 years later, that question would bring Dr. Shaw and Agent Miriam Cole to Holcomb County. 2 women standing in the ruins of a barn, listening to a field that hummed like a living thing. Shaw would later describe that sound as the earth breathing through memory. But before she could understand it, before anyone could, the hollow ground would speak again. Because the night after the bones were found, a motion-activated camera placed near the site captured something no one could explain. At 3:07 a.m., the soil beneath the open pit began to shift, rising slightly, as if something inside was moving. And then, through the faint mist, the camera caught a small silver glint, a bracelet, half buried in mud, catching the light of the moon. On its surface, LJ. The bracelet had returned. but from where or by whose hand, no one could say. And in Holcomb County, that was only the beginning. After the bracelet surfaced, the investigation shifted from who disappeared to why the ground itself seemed to remember. But to understand what was happening in Holcomb County, Dr. Eleanor Shaw needed to look backward, half a century into the mind of one man, Reverend Harold Jennings. And the key to that mind was a book, a plain, leather-bound ledger, found sealed inside the floorboards of the parish vestry. The ledger contained 126 pages, each written in the Reverend's careful, looping script. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary account book, baptisms, donations, parish expenses. But as Shaw read deeper, the handwriting began to change, letters smaller, tighter, almost frantic. Between the sermons and offerings, he had begun writing notes, confessions, prayers not meant for God, but for the soil beneath his feet. One entry, dated January 2nd, 1974, reads, "The voice beneath the church grows clearer. It asks for names. I give it the sinners first, but lately it asks for the pure." Dr. Shaw would later write in her field notes, Jennings appeared to believe the earth itself was a vessel for confession, a living archive of guilt. That belief became his obsession. He began spending nights in the church basement, claiming he was listening for God's reply. Parishioners recalled seeing light through the cellar windows at all hours, the Reverend's lantern flickering beneath the floorboards. One member, Martha Dunlop, told investigators, "Dunlop," he said, the soil spoke back, that when he pressed his ear to it, he could hear forgiveness. What forgiveness he sought, no one in Holcomb ever knew. Halfway through the ledger, something changes. The clean sermon notes vanish, replaced by names, dozens of them, each written in a tight column beside strange markings, circles, crosses, and spiral shapes resembling burial plots. At first, Shaw assumed they were church records, but when cross-referenced against county archives, nearly half of those names belonged to people who had died unexpectedly between 1958 and 1973. Farm accidents, drownings, disappearances. Some were children. Others were never officially declared dead at all. And beside Lena's name, the Reverend had drawn only one symbol, a small spiral ending in an arrow pointing downward. Dr. Shaw contacted local historian Peter Huxley to decode the symbols. His conclusion was unsettling. The spiral, in early Appalachian folklore, represented a binding mark, a way to anchor the spirit of the penitent to the land, until absolution was complete. In other words, Jennings wasn't just confessing sins. He believed he was tethering souls to the ground itself. When the Bureau analyzed the ledger, they found more than handwriting. Trace samples of soil embedded in the paper, dark, silty, and chemically identical to the hollow ground layer beneath the Jennings barn, meaning the Reverend wrote many of his entries with dirt on his hands. Literally, page 119 contained the last known entry before his disappearance. The voice is no longer beneath the church. It has moved into the fields, calls her name through the wind. I have given it what it asked, but it still hungers. Tomorrow night, I will open the ground. That entry was dated January 21st, 1974, the night before Lena vanished. To Dr. Shaw, the ledger wasn't evidence of faith. It was evidence of compulsion, a written record of a man slowly losing his grip on reality. But to the people of Holcomb, the ledger confirmed something older than science, that Reverend Jennings had made a bargain with the land, and that bargain demanded a life. Among the final items in the parish archives was a small audio cassette labeled Evening Confession 7. It was recorded 3 nights before Lena's disappearance. The first 90 seconds were silence. Then, a man's voice, trembling, tired. Reverend said, "The soil remembers. I tried to cleanse it with prayer, but it listens deeper than prayer can reach. I have given it names, and still it asks for hers. Reverend, if I must give it blood to end its hunger, let it be mine." The tape ends with the sound of the church door opening, then a long, low moan, not human, but something that vibrates through the microphone, like the earth itself sighing. Dr. Shaw played that tape 31 times. She said the moan wasn't feedback, it was resonance, the same frequency later measured in the soil beneath the barn. Whatever the Reverend was hearing, the ground was answering him. 2 weeks into her study, Shaw discovered something the county had overlooked, a gap in the ledger's pagination. Between pages 82 and 83, a missing sheet carefully torn out. When forensic light was applied to the binding edge, faint graphite residue revealed a partial sentence. And she forgave me before the light went out. That was the last visible trace of the missing page. Shaw believed it described Lena's final moments. But the evidence wasn't enough to prove guilt. Because in Holcomb County, truth never stays buried. It seeps through. It echoes. And sometimes it answers back. 3 nights after the ledger was found, Agent Miriam Cole returned to the barn site to collect the motion sensor footage. But when she approached the excavation pit, she noticed something strange, a pattern drawn in the fresh mud, a spiral identical to the one from the Reverend's ledger. No one had been there since the previous morning. The area was fenced, padlocked, and under constant surveillance. Still, there it was, perfect spiral, freshly etched in wet soil. At its center lay a single object, a page fragment, brittle and blackened with moisture. Lab analysis confirmed it matched the missing page from the ledger. The words barely legible, ink smeared by years of decay. Only a few lines could be read. The voice rose through her breath. The ground opened like a mouth. She smiled, as though she saw light beneath. Below that, a final signature, H. Jennings. To this day, no one can explain how that page appeared at the site. The excavation team swore the pit had been undisturbed. Yet somehow, the ledger had come home to the same soil that birthed it. It was as if the ground itself was returning the Reverend's words, piece by piece. Shaw's official report closed with one final observation. This field behaves like memory, keeps what it's given, and it gives back only what we fear to see. When she sealed the evidence crate, she wrote a single line on its label. The land remembers confession. What began as a missing person case had become something much older, a dialogue between the living and the buried. And as Holcomb County tried to forget its ghosts, the hollow ground began to whisper again, because there were still names, unspoken in the Reverend's ledger, and one of them belonged to someone still alive. At dawn the next morning, fog rolled over the hollow ground. Like a living thing, it clung to the excavators, to the tire tracks, to the edges of the collapsed barn, as if refusing to let go of what lay beneath. Dr. Eleanor Shaw stood at the pit's edge, hands in her coat pockets, her breath rising white against the cold. Beside her, Agent Miriam Cole scrolled through photos on her tablet, images of that spiral pattern in the mud. Neither woman spoke for several minutes, because both knew what it meant. The pattern wasn't random. It was deliberate. Someone or something had returned the Reverend's missing page. Shaw's first order was simple: seal off the pit, retest the soil, and map every frequency recorded in the ground. Over the next 48 hours, the Bureau's environmental lab deployed a set of low-frequency sensors across the Jennings property, devices capable of detecting subterranean vibrations at a resolution finer than human hearing. What they found defied geological explanation. The soil itself was resonating. At intervals of exactly 17 minutes and 20 seconds, the sensors picked up a faint pulse, a vibration deep within the hollow ground layer. It was subtle, barely measurable, but consistent. The source was localized, directly beneath the barn's foundation. Dr. Shaw replayed the readings multiple times. Each pulse sounded like a note, a tone too low for human ears, but unmistakably patterned, almost musical. Agent Cole called it the heartbeat of the hollow ground. But Shaw refused to call it supernatural. To her, it was physics, pressure waves, buried acoustics from collapsed chambers. Something buried deep. That was still shifting. So she ordered a deeper dig. The team descended 5 more feet, into compacted soil and fossilized clay. At this depth, the air turned colder, the texture of the earth, changing from brown loam to slate-gray powder. Every scoop of the backhoe released a smell, damp, metallic, like rusted iron and rain-soaked ash. Dr. Shaw described it later as a scent that didn't belong to any season. At 22 feet below surface, the excavator struck something solid. At first, they thought it was stone, but the color was wrong, a deep tarnished bronze, veined with streaks of dark green. It wasn't natural. They cleared away the soil by hand. The outline of an object began to appear, rectangular, roughly the size of a small trunk, its surface engraved with faint markings. The pattern matched the one from the Reverend's ledger. The spiral, but this time, it was carved into metal. They documented every inch, photographed it, scanned it, and when they tried to lift it, they realized it wasn't sealed to the ground. It was the ground. The soil seemed fused to it, as though the box had grown from the earth itself. Shaw ordered a portable X-ray unit from the county morgue. Within an hour, the team gathered around the flickering monitor. Inside the bronze casing, something was visible, dense material, organic in shape, curved like ribs or roots, but it wasn't bone. When they powered down the equipment, a new sound emerged, a low hum, barely audible at first, then rising, filling the excavation pit with a vibration you could feel in your chest. Every sensor on site registered the same frequency. As the soil pulses, 17 minutes and 20 seconds. Only now, it wasn't coming from below. It was coming from inside the box. Shaw froze. Cole stepped back. And then the hum stopped. Silence. For 10 full seconds, no one moved. Then the lead technician, a man named Harris, whispered something the microphone barely caught. Harris, it's breathing. The box shifted. Just slightly. Enough for the soil around it to crack. But when they examined it again, the surface was still cold, solid, immobile. Shaw later said she couldn't shake the thought that the Reverend's final entry, the one about opening the ground, might not have been metaphorical after all. That night, they sealed the pit and transported the artifact to the Holcomb County Forensic Lab. Shaw stayed behind. She said she needed a moment alone. In her field notes, she wrote, "The wind sounds different down here, hollow like a throat. When I close my eyes, it's almost like listening through someone else's ears." At 2:37 a.m., motion sensors captured movement near the excavation site. A lone figure, blurred, distorted by fog, stood beside the tarp, staring down into the pit for nearly 3 minutes. The footage was dark, the face obscured, but when enhanced by digital forensics, it appeared to be wearing something unusual, a white collar, the kind worn by clergy. The next morning, Dr. Shaw received a call from Reverend Jennings' grandson, Thomas. He'd heard about the discovery. He wanted to see the box himself. Thomas Jennings was 47, a mechanic who had never spoken publicly about his grandfather's disappearance. But he told Shaw something she couldn't ignore. Thomas' interview, "Grandpa used to tell me stories about the ground talking. He said the land held what the church couldn't forgive. Said if the wind ever started humming, it meant the earth wanted to remember again." When the artifact arrived at the lab, the team placed it inside a sealed observation chamber. Infrared scans showed no heat signatures, no mechanical components, nothing that could explain the hum. But as technicians monitored the readings, the lights in the lab began to flicker. Every instrument lost sync. For exactly 17 minutes and 20 seconds. When systems came back online, the recording devices had captured a new sound. A whisper. A woman's voice. Voice from recording. "It's cold down here. Forensic audio confirmed it wasn't an echo or feedback. The voice carried formant frequencies, the kind only produced by living vocal cords. The spectral analysis matched a single profile in the Bureau database, Lena Jennings. Dr. Shaw refused to accept it. The sample had to be contaminated, the analysis mistaken. But when the test was repeated independently, at the Bureau's Quantico lab, the result was the same. The voice on that tape was biologically identical to the woman who vanished 50 years ago. For the first time, the investigation crossed a line from history into something impossible. The barn was gone, the soil disturbed, but the hollow ground still spoke. And now, it had started calling back, in a voice they could all recognize. The next pulse was due at 4:03 a.m. Dr. Shaw and Agent Cole stayed in the observation room. As the hum began again, this time the sound grew stronger, spilling from the speakers and vibrating the walls. And through the low frequency, pattern emerged. Not random, not noise. It was a message. 3 words, repeated over and over. He's still here. When Shaw turned toward Cole, she realized the hum wasn't coming from the speakers anymore. It was coming from the floor, the same pitch, the same rhythm, as if the hollow ground was answering from beneath the lab itself. By morning, the Bureau ordered a full lockdown. No one in or out. All communications cut. But by then, the hum had already spread, picked up by seismic sensors, across 3 neighboring counties, each pulse matching the timestamp of Lena's disappearance. Whatever the Reverend opened half a century ago, it wasn't done speaking, and the next message wasn't going to be from the past. It was coming for whoever listened next. By the 3rd week, the sound no longer frightened them. It was simply there, like the ticking of a clock that no one had ever noticed before. Inside the Bureau's sealed lab, Dr. Eleanor Shaw sat surrounded by spectral graphs and looping recordings. Each trace showed the same pattern. A pulse every 17 minutes and 20 seconds. Steady, patient, impossible. But that morning, something changed. The hum shifted. It bent upward, as if a note in an unfinished song had finally found its next pitch. The computer registered the variation as a phase jump, a microscopic delay measured in thousandths of a second. To anyone else, meaningless. To Shaw, a message. She overlaid the pulse with its earlier recordings. The gaps between beats weren't random. They formed ratios that matched coordinates. Latitude, longitude. A point roughly 11 miles northeast of Holcomb County. A stretch of overgrown woodland once listed as church-owned property. Long abandoned. The locals called it Bell's Hollow. By afternoon, Agent Miriam Cole and Dr. Shaw drove out toward the coordinates. The road narrowed to a single dirt lane, the forest closing in around them. Cole watched the signal meter on her dash. Every mile they drove, the hum grew stronger. The waveform climbed, peaking each time they passed an old utility pole, as if the sound was using the power lines to travel. At mile 11, the road ended in a clearing. Nothing but grass, mist, and a stone foundation almost swallowed by ivy. They'd found what used to be the Bell's Mission Orchard, a property once run by Reverend Jennings before the parish took him. The air felt heavier here, wet, like the breath of a cave. Dr. Shaw set up a handheld spectrum mic, pointing it toward the soil. The display came alive instantly, not with one frequency, but 2. A primary hum, the old 1720 pulse, and a faint, higher oscillation layered beneath it, like a heartbeat hidden under another. Cole glanced at her. "This can't be coincidence," she said. Shaw only nodded. She was already listening closer. She realized the secondary tone wasn't continuous. It rose for precisely 13 seconds each cycle, then stopped, and during that silence, the primary hum distorted into a whisper of static. When she slowed the playback, that distortion formed rhythm. 3 bursts. Pause. For bursts. Pause. 2. Morse code. Spelled one word. Light. Cole stared at the waveform, her voice low. Light, as in illumination? Shaw shook her head. No. In the Reverend's sermons, light meant truth. Exposure. The hum returned, louder now, as if answering her. They followed the signal across the clearing, meters rising as they neared the foundation ruins. Under a layer of moss and brittle boards was an entrance, a hatch of corroded iron. The padlock had long since rusted away. When Cole pulled it open, a rush of cold air hit them, stale and dry, like air sealed in a tomb. A narrow stairway led underground. Shaw turned on her recorder. Shaw on tape. October 3rd, 11:12 p.m. We're beneath Bell's hollow structure. The hum registers stronger, 2 decibels higher than surface. Temperature, 43 degrees. The corridor ended at a small brick chamber. Dust, broken pews, scraps of candle wax. And against the far wall, a collapsed altar. Behind it, something glimmered under their flashlights. A metal plate, the same bronze alloy as the box from the barn, etched with the spiral pattern. But this one was fixed into the wall, conduit of sorts, and it was vibrating. Cole recorded. It's active. Feel that. It's responding to us. Cole placed her palm against the plate. The hum deepened, a slow roll like thunder trapped beneath stone. Then, faintly, a voice not from speakers, but from the metal itself. A man's voice. Forgive them. The plate went still. Cole backed away, her hand shaking. They replayed the tape later in the truck. The word was clear. Forgive them. Shaw compared the voice print against the Bureau's digital archive. It matched the Reverend's sermon recordings. From 1972, 2 voices, 2 sites, 2 messages half a century apart. One saying he's still here, the other forgive them, both delivered through soil and metal. Dr. Shaw started to see the pattern differently. Not haunting, not resurrection, but repetition, as though the earth were playing back the same confession, looping endlessly until someone finally answered. They decided to return at night with ground-penetrating radar, to map what lay beneath the mission ruins. At 2 a.m., the scanner rendered an image on the monitor. A hollow cavity about 12 feet below, perfectly round, roughly 10 feet across. Inside that cavity, a cluster of metallic reflections, not stone, not wood. Circular objects arranged like spokes of a wheel. When they overlaid the map onto the Reverend's ledger symbols, the geometry matched the drawing labeled Covenant Wheel. By dawn, the rain had turned the clearing into a mirror of mud. They packed their gear, planning to file a full excavation request. But before they left, Cole's radio came alive. A burst of static, then a tone. The same 1720 frequency. Only now it wasn't background. It was broadcasting. Someone somewhere was sending it. The signal meter spiked, and with it, a faint voice emerged beneath the static. Not from their equipment, but from a nearby transmitter tower, half collapsed against the trees. Cole climbed the slope, found the tower's base still wired to a dead generator. On its control panel, an analog dial was turning by itself. Cole said, "The transmitter's active. Power reading 0.07 volts. There's no source. It's broadcasting nothing but that hum." Shaw looked closer. Each pulse on the dial's display formed letters in binary translation. Spelled a date. January 22nd, 1974. The night Lena Jennings disappeared. The meaning was clear. The signal wasn't a haunting. It was an archive. A transmission trapped in time, repeating until someone tuned to the right frequency. But that night in Bell's Hollow, something, or someone, was still transmitting it. The soil beneath the tower began to vibrate. The hum turned physical, rattling loose pebbles and shaking the air around them. Cole shouted over the noise. "Cole, we need to move now." Shaw hesitated, recorder still running. Through the rising static, one last phrase bled through. Voice. "He is coming home." And just like that, the signal stopped. Every instrument flatlined. No hum, no vibration, only the echo of rain. and the smell of ozone where the tower once stood. Back at the bureau, the audio file from that night showed something impossible. The pulse pattern didn't end at the transmitter's coordinates. It continued, projected further north, another 5 miles into forest, where no road or structure remained. A new location, a final site, and for the first time, the pulse interval had changed. Not 17 minutes and 20 seconds anymore. It now beat every 16 minutes and 19. Faster, closer, as though whatever lay buried was waking up. Before sunrise, Cole marked the new coordinates on the map. A small valley, the locals once called the Silent Field. No one had lived there for decades, just a few fence posts, and the remains of another church burned long ago. Shaw looked at the map, then at the faint glow of her recorder light. Shaw said, "If the ground remembers confession, then maybe this is where it waits for absolution. There's a kind of silence that doesn't belong to nature. It's not peace, it's absence." And when Agent Cole and Dr. Eleanor Shaw stepped into the valley that morning, they felt it instantly. The air was still, as though sound itself had chosen not to cross this place. Even the birds refused to sing. They were standing in the middle of what the locals once called the Silent Field. The field stretched half a mile wide, ringed by dying pines and the broken bones of a church that had burned long before either of them were born. Cole unpacked the electromagnetic scanner. Shaw unpacked the recorder. And as the wind crawled through the grass, the hum began again. Faint, rising from somewhere below their feet. Cole, "It's back." Shaw, "No, listen. The interval's shorter. 16 minutes. Something's accelerating." The signal now beat like a nervous heart, each pulse sending tremors through the soil, as if the field were breathing. But this time, it wasn't just sound. It was light. Tiny glimmers, no larger than dust motes, began to rise from the earth where the old church once stood. Pale blue, flickering, like embers of some invisible fire still burning underground. Cole knelt down, brushing the dirt with her gloved hand. When her fingers touched the soil, the recorder in Shaw's bag flared to life. No one had pressed play, but a voice came through, soft, trembling, and unmistakably human. Voice, "Don't let him out." The audio stopped as abruptly as it began. When they checked the tape, there was no file, no record of sound, just 7 seconds of blank static. Shaw rewound, listened again. Nothing. Shaw, maybe it wasn't recording, but she didn't believe that. Not for a second. They set up their ground radar again. The scanner's pulse mapped beneath the field, and within minutes a new shape appeared. Another cavity. Only this one wasn't round. It was a rectangle, 10 by 5 feet. Depth, 6 feet. A grave. And not alone. Beside it, faint outlines of 2 more. All unmarked. Shaw looked at Cole. They both knew what came next. They called in a forensics team from the Bureau's field office, secured the site, and by nightfall, under halogen floodlights, they began to dig. The first few feet revealed nothing but charred soil and roots. Then, the shovel hit something solid. Metal. A small box, half melted, its lid fused shut. When they pried it open, they found ashes and bones. Tiny ones. A child's hand. The moment froze time. Every agent stopped moving, the only sound the rain tapping their jackets. Shaw stepped forward, lifting the remains with trembling gloves. The bones were fused by heat, but what caught her attention wasn't the damage. It was what was inside the tiny palm. A locket, melted into a heart-shaped smear of metal, its outline barely intact. On the back, an engraving still legible. "To my brightest light am." The hum surged through the field again, so strong the halogen lights flickered. One by one, their generators cut off. Darkness swallowed them, and from the trench, Shaw swore she heard movement, soft, almost curious, like fingers brushing against the soil. Cole shone her flashlight down. The earth had begun to shift. The bones were moving. They backed away fast. Agents shouted. The hum grew louder, not from the ground anymore, but from beneath the burned church's crossbeam, where something metal began to glow, the same spiral pattern from the barn and the mission wall, except now it was burned into wood. The symbol pulsed in sync with the hum, as if drawing power from whatever slept below. Cole, this isn't electromagnetic. This is God. What is this? Before anyone could respond, a flash tore through the field. Every device, camera, recorder, radio, died. The hum cut out completely, and in that hollow silence, a voice spoke again, not from a speaker, not from the ground, but from everywhere. Voice, you found the first. There are two more. Then nothing. When the power returned minutes later, the symbol had vanished from the crossbeam. Only the child's remains remained, half buried in the wet earth. Forensics logged the bones as juvenile female. Approximate age, 6 to 8. DNA results would take days. But for Shaw, the message was already clear. The Reverend's family hadn't vanished. They'd been buried right here. Back at their motel that night, Shaw couldn't sleep. She replayed the 7 seconds of static. Over and over. At the 5th second mark, there was a flicker, a spectral trace in the waveform. When amplified, it revealed a faint voice whispering just one word. Marjorie. Lena Jennings' middle name. If that voice was real, it meant the hum wasn't random at all. It was intelligent. It knew who they were, and it was leading them step by step through its own history. But to what end? No one could yet say. The Bureau filed an order for deeper excavation of the silent field. Cole wanted to bring in ground archaeologists and hazard teams. Shaw wanted to stay behind for one more night of observation. And she did. Alone. At 3:04 a.m., she turned her recorder on and set it beside the window. Outside, the field glowed faintly under the moon, patches of fog drifting like memory. She spoke quietly, more to herself than the machine. Shaw, I don't know what you are, but you've been calling for 50 years. I'm listening now. For almost 16 minutes, nothing happened. Then, on the 17th, a sound emerged from her speakers, soft at first, then rising like breath. A heartbeat. Real rhythmic, coming from beneath the field. She leaned closer. The pulse grew faster, then stuttered, splitting into two alternating beats, as if two hearts were responding to each other through the soil. Her eyes widened. The hum was no longer mechanical. It was biological. And in that moment, the signal changed again. Her recorder light flickered red. A new voice whispered through the static. Fragile, almost childlike. Voice. You found me. Shaw froze. The voice hadn't come from the tape. It had come from outside the motel. From the dark. She grabbed her flashlight and crossed to the window. In the parking lot below, a single figure stood. A small girl, barefoot, wearing a white dress soaked by mist. She was looking up at the room. And though the night was silent, Shaw could see her lips move, forming the same words again. You found me. When Shaw blinked, the girl was gone. Only footprints remained in the wet gravel, leading toward the forest, and vanishing halfway through the trees. The same forest that bordered the silent field. By morning, Agent Cole returned to find Shaw's recorder still running, its battery drained. The last minute of tape captured. A faint hum echoing through the motel walls, like something breathing in time with the building's frame. And beneath it, almost too faint to hear, another whisper. Voice. She remembers. Morning came gray and uncertain. Agent Miriam Cole hadn't slept. The storm outside Holcomb County blurred the horizon into silver mist, and inside room 14 of the roadside inn, Dr. Eleanor Shaw sat at the small wooden desk, headphones on, eyes fixed on a single wavering line across her laptop screen. That line, that pulse, was the last thing the motel recorder had captured before its battery died. A child's voice. 7 seconds. No file before it. No file after. Just, you found me. Cole stood behind her, arms folded. She'd heard the playback twice already, but each time it hit the same place in her chest. A strange, involuntary ache, as if grief itself had found a frequency. Cole, run it again. Shaw didn't answer. She simply pressed play. The voice filled the room. Soft, breathy, painfully human. Cole, could be interference. A cross signal from a radio tower. Shaw, I already checked. The nearest tower's 22 miles away. The signal strength here is 0. Cole, then maybe it's playback bleed from our own recordings. Shaw, no, Miriam. This isn't us. She slowed the audio to half speed. On the spectrogram, faint harmonics blossomed like veins. Each consonant carried a frequency impossible for analog equipment to fake. Real. Organic. Shaw highlighted the waveform. There, beneath the whisper, another tone. A steady hum at 16.19 hertz, matching the last signal from the silent field. 2 sources. One mechanical, one biological. Merged. Shaw said. It's as if the field itself spoke through her. Cole looked away. Something about that sentence, the word her, made the air feel heavier. For hours they dissected the file. Noise reduction. Frequency isolation. Each pass stripped away more static until the voice grew painfully clear. Voice. You found me. Then, barely audible after it. A faint inhale. A real breath. Shaw leaned back, her throat tight. Shaw. Children don't fake fear like that. Cole. We don't know it's a child. Shaw. Then what is it, Miriam? A feedback loop that breathes. The question hung there, suspended in the drone of rain and fluorescent light. Cole rubbed her temples. Her badge felt suddenly heavier in her pocket. She'd spent 2 decades chasing disappearances, each one leaving a mark she pretended not to notice. But this one, this voice, cut deeper, because it wasn't crying for help. It was thanking them, and gratitude, she knew, only came after someone had given up hope. By afternoon, the field team called in with preliminary DNA from the remains. Juvenile female, age 6 to 7. Mitochondrial link to Lena Jennings. Her daughter, Marjorie. Shaw stared at the report until the letters blurred. The small bones in that box were Lena's child, and the whisper that had crossed 50 years of silence was her voice. Shaw. She was calling for her mother. Cole swallowed hard. Cole, then why call you? No answer. Only the hum, still faintly alive through the laptop speaker, like the heartbeat of something too stubborn to die. That night, they took the file to the Bureau's mobile lab for full spectral analysis. Technicians isolated each frequency, mapped the waveform in 3-dimensional space. The pattern formed an outline, a curve that repeated every 17 seconds. When rotated, it resembled handwriting. The letters MJ, Marjorie Jennings. No one in the room spoke for a long time. Then Shaw whispered the obvious question. Shaw, is she recorded somewhere in the soil? The technician shrugged. Tech could be acoustic fossilization. Some minerals hold sound vibrations for decades. Same principle as tape magnetization. Cole, you're saying the ground taped her voice? Tech, if the conditions were right, yes. Shaw stared at the waveform. Shaw. Then the Earth remembered her. That explanation, scientific, plausible, safe, should have ended the mystery. But it didn't, because when they replayed the voice through the lab speakers, something new appeared on the monitor. A faint echo before the words. Negative time. A signal arriving half a second too early to be a recording. Tech, that's impossible. You can't have pre-echo without tape. Cole, unless it wasn't playback. Unless she was answering. The room fell silent again. Cole turned to the window. Outside, the storm had finally cleared. Beyond the glass, the highway shimmered under streetlights, quiet and endless. She thought about all the missing posters she'd cataloged over the years. Faces of children frozen in time, their parents waiting for an answer that never came. Maybe this impossible voice was what an answer sounded like, when the world took too long to give it. At 11:52 p.m., the spectrogram spiked again. Without anyone touching a key, the playback began looping itself. 3 repetitions of the same whisper, each one slower than the last. Voice slowed. "You found me." On the final loop, a new word slipped in, barely a breath. Voice. "Cold." Cole and Shaw stared at each other. Cold. The burial site. The grave. Shaw replayed it once more. The word was clear, but not pleading. Descriptive. A fact. Shaw. "Maybe she's showing us where to look next." Cole. "There's nowhere left to dig." Shaw. "Then maybe below." They cross-referenced the GPS logs from Bell's Hollow and the Silent Field. Beneath the valley, old geological surveys showed a network of natural sinkholes. And one sealed tunnel dating back to 1899, the same year the first church on that site was built. The tunnel led north, under the ridge line, toward the ruins of the Jennings farm. If the hum had traveled through soil for decades, that tunnel could have carried it. Perfect resonant chamber. Cole exhaled. Cole. "So the voice isn't haunting us. It's echoing through that tunnel." Shaw. "Maybe. But how do you explain the pre-echo?" Cole had no answer. Neither did science. They packed the gear in silence. Outside, the rain returned, soft and rhythmic, beating exactly in time with the 16-minute pulse. Before leaving, Shaw turned the recorder on once more. Not to test, but to speak. "Shaw. Marjorie, if you can hear me, we found you. We'll bring you home." The device's light blinked green. For a moment, it almost seemed to pulse in reply. Later, when Cole reviewed the recording, she noticed something Shaw hadn't. After those words, after the final click of the stop button, the tape continued for 2 more seconds. And in that sliver of silence, a whisper, soft, uncertain, but unmistakably the same child's voice. Voice faint. "Home." By morning, the storm had drained from the sky, leaving the fields raw and shining. The demolition crew hadn't returned. Local authorities had closed the site until further notice. Only 2 vehicles waited by the yellow tape, the Bureau van, and Shaw's old sedan, its trunk heavy with soil samples. Inside the van, Agent Miriam Cole stared at a topographic map spread across the table. Dr. Eleanor Shaw hovered beside her, one hand wrapped around a mug gone cold. The red lines traced old tunnel routes discovered beneath Holcomb County, abandoned mining shafts and limestone channels, sealed when the last church burned down in 1899. Somewhere beneath those lines was the echo that had carried Marjorie Jennings' voice. Cole said, "Here. See this depression near the old barn? The survey shows a hollow running northeast. Connects to the ridge under Jennings' farm." Shaw. "And the hum runs the same direction." Cole nodded. Cole. "If sound travels through the cavity, the resonance could have recorded fragments. Voices, machinery, anything." Shaw studied the thin red vein beneath her fingertip. Shaw. "And if it isn't resonance?" Cole's silence was answer enough. Both women knew what the other feared, that the voice wasn't trapped in the tunnel. It was coming through it. By mid-morning, they were descending the narrow service road toward the ridge. Fog lingered between the trees, a white veil that swallowed the world 20 feet ahead. The van's headlights picked out the ruins of a stone foundation, the only remains of the old Jennings farm. They parked beside the fallen chimney. The air smelled of moss and cold iron. Cole, "You ever notice how these places never feel empty?" Just paused. Shaw. "Memories don't vanish with the people, Miriam. They stay where the noise was loudest." They found the access point just after noon, a half-buried iron grate hidden beneath rotted boards and vines. When they pried it open, a breath of air rose from below, dry, cold, and ancient. Cole. "God, smells like dust and matches." Shaw. "Sulfur from limestone decay." Cole lifted her flashlight, its beam cutting into the throat of the earth. Steps descended into blackness. Cole, we should wait for backup. Shaw, if the hum's still active, we could lose it. Just 20 minutes down and back. Cole hesitated, then clipped her badge light to her jacket. Cole, 20 minutes. The tunnel swallowed them whole. Moisture beaded on the walls like sweat, and each step echoed until it no longer sounded like footsteps, but a slow, heart-like pulse. The deeper they went, the louder the hum became, a low vibration that pressed against their ribs rather than their ears. Shaw checked the handheld meter. 16.19 hertz. Exactly the frequency of the recording. Shaw, it's strongest ahead. Another 50 feet. Cole, I don't like this. Feels like the ground's breathing. Shaw, that's the pressure equalizing. But even she didn't believe it. The passage opened into a small cavern, its ceiling ribbed with wooden supports blackened by age. In the center stood the remnants of a brick archway, half collapsed, leading nowhere. The hum originated there, vibrating through the stone like a living vein. Cole lifted her recorder, hit rec. Static hissed, then stabilized. Voice. Cold. Cole froze. Cole, did you hear that? Shaw nodded slowly. Shaw. She said the same word last night. They began documenting every surface. The mineral stains, the etched marks that looked at first like cracks, until Shaw brushed away a film of dust and revealed shallow carvings. Initials repeated over and over. MJ. Cole. Kids from the church might have used this place. Secret spot. Hide and seek. Shaw. Or a shelter. Cole. From what? Shaw. From whoever buried her. A chill wind rolled through the chamber, snuffing out Cole's flashlight for a heartbeat. In that dark instant both women heard it. A brief, unmistakable giggle, the kind that sits on the edge between joy and sorrow. When the beam flickered back, nothing moved. Shaw's rational mind catalogued possibilities. Air displacement, auditory pareidolia. But her heart, heavy from too many nights of listening to ghosts, told her what she didn't want to admit. The sound hadn't echoed. It had replied. Dispatch. Unit 7, status check. Cole pressed the mic. Cole, we're inside the primary tunnel. No structural hazards. Picking up residual sound activity. Dispatch. Copy that. Weather shift incoming. Advise return to surface within 10. Cole lowered the radio. Cole, 10 minutes. Shaw nodded, but her eyes stayed fixed on the archway. The hum dipped a full octave, so deep it rattled their teeth. Cracks spidered through the brick. From the darkness beyond, a new tone emerged, a high, trembling pitch, like a child drawing air before a sob. Shaw, it's modulation. She's trying to change frequency. Cole, Eleanor. The pitch climbed until the recorder clipped, then collapsed into silence. When the dust cleared, Shaw knelt beside a small cavity exposed at the base of the arch. Inside lay a rusted tin lunchbox, the surface caked in calcite. Cole crouched beside her. Cole, looks like it's been here forever. They pried it open carefully. Inside, a child's hair ribbon, a marble, and a damp, folded scrap of paper. Shaw unfolded it with gloved hands. 2 words scrawled in faded pencil. Don't let him find me. Neither woman spoke. They both knew what it meant. The case file had always said Lena Jennings fled an abusive husband, but there'd never been proof. Now there was. The tunnel hadn't been a tomb. It had been a hiding place. And the hum, perhaps not a haunting, but a resonance born from the trauma that started here. Still, the voice in the recording was too clear, too new. Cole closed the box gently. Cole, we'll send this to forensics. DNA on the ribbon might still be viable. Shaw. And the voice. Cole glanced toward the dark archway. Cole, let's say it's an echo, a very persistent one. As they climbed back toward daylight, the air grew warmer, the hum dimmer, until it was gone entirely. But on the final step, Shaw felt her phone vibrate, A new audio file, timestamped exactly 1 minute prior, sent from no identifiable source. She opened it. Voice. He's still here. Outside, the sky had turned the color of lead. Wind pressed through the grass with the sound of rushing water. Coal sealed the grate behind them, but Shaw knew the tunnel wouldn't stay quiet. Whatever lived in the frequencies of that soil had learned to speak, and somewhere under Holcomb's ridges, a deeper story waited, not of ghosts, but of sins that refused burial. By the next morning, the field looked peaceful again, dew pooling in ruts, birds gathering along the fence line. But inside the bureau lab, the peace was gone. Cole and Shaw had played the whisper file a dozen times, each playback colder, sharper, as if the voice was crawling closer through the static. The DNA report arrived just before dawn. Dr. Shaw tore the seal open, her eyes tracing the graph lines. One name glowed on the screen, Lena Jennings. But the second sequence, the smaller, unregistered profile, didn't match any known relatives. It was from a child, a girl, estimated age 7 to 8. Shaw. There was never mention of a child. Cole. Then somebody erased her. The silence between them said the rest. The Reverend's missing daughter, Lena's child, had existed, and someone wanted that fact buried deeper than the barn itself. Cole began combing through sealed church archives. Files black-stamped Holcomb First Tabernacle, 1973 to 1975. Most pages were routine. Sermons, tithes, construction receipts. Until she found a ledger entry dated May 19, 1974, 2 weeks before Lena vanished. Special fund withdrawn, $200. Purpose, temporary guardianship. No guardian listed, just 2 initials, H.J. Cole to Shaw. He paid someone, maybe to hide the girl. Shaw. Or to keep her quiet. They drove back to Holcomb that afternoon, the road cutting through wheat fields the color of rust. The old parsonage was gone now, a rectangle of scorched stone and nettles. But Shaw had noticed something odd on the survey maps. A second cellar beneath the chapel ruins, never logged in any restoration records. When they reached the site, the air felt electrically charged, the kind of pressure that builds before a storm. Cole. You feel that? Shaw. Subsonic vibration. Same as the tunnel. Cole. Same frequency? Shaw. 16.19. Exactly the voice's pitch. They pried open a rusted trapdoor half hidden beneath weeds. Dust poured out like smoke. The steps below were slick with soot. At the bottom, the beam of their flashlights revealed pew fragments, melted glass, and a blackened altar stone split clean down the center. Behind it, carved into the wall, a narrow cavity sealed with plaster and nails. Cole. It's a burial niche. Shaw. Or a vault. She chipped at the plaster until a thin sheet flaked away, exposing something wrapped in oilcloth. Inside was a wooden box no larger than a Bible, the lid burned with a single symbol, a cross inverted over a circle. Jennings's handwriting etched beneath. Sins contained. Inside the box lay 3 items. A silver crucifix bent in half. A cracked reel-to-reel tape labeled May 25, 74, confession. And a child's drawing. A house, a man, and a girl with yellow hair, standing beside a black circle in the ground. Cole threaded the tape onto a field recorder. Static filled the room. Then a trembling male voice. Reverend Jennings, recording. Forgive me, Lord, I tried to keep her safe. The earth wanted her, same as the rest. But she was my blood, my curse. The hum is hungry. If I bury it, it will take me instead. Then the sound of wood striking wood, a child's scream, and finally, a single phrase repeated until the tape snapped. Voice child. Papa, please, don't let it find me. The recording ended, but the hum in the chamber did not. It grew louder, rising through the cracks beneath their feet. Cole steadied her flashlight on the altar stone. Fine dust lifted from it in steady pulses, as if the ground beneath was exhaling. Cole. He said it would take him. You think he meant the cave-in? Shaw. Maybe. Or maybe something older than a cave-in. Cole. You're starting to sound like the locals. Shaw. Maybe the locals were right. The altar cracked wider. Through the fissure came a smell like burnt cedar and wet metal. Shaw aimed her meter. The reading spiked into the red. 16.19, then higher, 17, 18, until the needle jammed. Cole pulled Shaw backward as the slab tilted forward, revealing a shallow pit filled with black water. In it floated remnants of fabric. A clerical collar, a torn hymnal cover, and a single femur bone. Cole whisper, "That's him." Shaw. Or what's left. Bubbles broke the surface. Each burst released a low tone, the same harmonic pattern as the voice on the recording. Cole. Jesus. It's reproducing the sound. Shaw. No. It's remembering it. They sealed the chamber, collected samples, and sent them to the Bureau's acoustics division. The preliminary analysis stunned the technicians. The water molecules held residual vibration signatures, microimprints identical to recorded speech frequencies, like grooves on vinyl but in liquid. The soil wasn't just absorbing sound, it was storing it. And in every sample, beneath the bass hum, another tone hid faint but constant, the cadence of a human heartbeat. 2 nights later, Shaw sat alone in her motel room. Rain drummed against the window. The ribbon lay across the desk under a microscope lamp. She wasn't sure why she kept it there. Maybe to remind herself that beneath all the data was a frightened child no one had saved. Her phone buzzed. An email from the Bureau Audio Lab. Subject line, Voice Comparison Report. She opened it. The waveform from the tape and the whisper from her phone matched perfectly. 98.6% identical. The whisper saying, "He's still here," wasn't the child. It was the Reverend. The motel lights dimmed. Her recorder on the table blinked red, though she hadn't turned it on. A new file appeared on the screen, timestamped that moment. Voice. "It's not buried." Then silence. Shaw froze. The words echoed through her memory of the ledger, the confession, the hum beneath the barn. She thought of the pit, the way the air moved there, breathing. Shaw. "What's not buried, Reverend?" But there was no answer. Only the faint rhythmic pulse from her phone speaker, a heartbeat fading into static. By dawn, the Bureau sealed every entry into the Holcomb tunnels. Official statement. Unstable terrain. Environmental hazard. Unofficially, the site was marked red. Restricted. Indefinite. Cole filed her report. But Shaw couldn't shake the phrase, "It's not buried," because she realized what they hadn't checked. The place directly beneath the original barn foundation. And by the next night, they would be there again, under floodlights and falling rain, ready to find whatever the earth refused to keep. The next night, the valley under Holcomb County was silent, except for the steady pulse of water running in unseen streams. Shaw and Cole arrived just as darkness fully fell, their headlights cutting long, pale beams through fog that clung to the grass. The barn foundation loomed ahead, a skeleton of timber and stone. To anyone else, it looked empty. To them, it held secrets buried for decades. The soil, the tunnel, the hum, and somewhere deep beneath, the echoes of the Reverend and his daughter. Cole. "We don't know what we're walking into." Shaw. "We know enough to be careful. Let's hope careful is enough." They set up a portable ground-penetrating radar, flashing its green lines across the soil, and mapped the foundation down to the bedrock. The readings were irregular, a hollow cavity running beneath the barn, wide enough to walk in, and deeper than the tunnel at the chapel ruins. Shaw's stomach tightened. If the frequency had traveled through this cavity, the resonance of voices would be concentrated here. And if the whispers had persisted for 50 years, what else might have survived? They pried open the small hatch at the northern corner, careful not to dislodge the rotted timbers. A wave of cold air rushed past their faces, and Cole instinctively covered her mouth. Below, a ladder descended into darkness, its rungs slick with moss and moisture. Cole. "Ready." Shaw, as I'll ever be. One step at a time they descended. The air grew damp, earthy, and weighted, filled with that unmistakable hum, as if the very soil was vibrating with memory. At the bottom, the cavity widened into a low chamber, rough-hewn, its walls damp and lined with centuries of sediment. A single beam of light from their flashlights revealed fragments of wooden beams, long decayed and markings on the wall. Initials carved decades ago, worn but visible, MJ. The hum intensified as they stepped further. Shaw checked her frequency meter, 16.19 hertz. The pulse matched the child's whisper exactly. Shaw, it's her. Cole. Or, it's what she left behind. The whisper floated from the far end of the chamber. It wasn't crying. It wasn't fear. It was quiet, sad. Shaw knelt and touched the soil. The vibration hummed beneath her fingers. Every heartbeat, every breath, every whisper the child had made was etched into the ground itself. Shaw, she's still here, somehow. Every sound, every memory, preserved. Cole shivered. Cole, it's like the earth recorded her entire life. Shaw, or at least what she left behind before they found her. They followed the hum deeper, toward a depression in the floor that suggested a hidden pit. A faint outline of boards had rotted into the dirt, and beneath it a cavity just wide enough to crawl into. Cole shone her flashlight in. Water pooled in shallow depth, black as ink. The frequency meter spiked again. Shaw's recorder picked up a whisper. Voice. Home. Cole. It's repeating. Shaw nodded. Shaw. Everything she felt, every terror, is all here, and it's not silent yet. They set to work documenting the chamber, photographing every detail, collecting soil and water samples. Even the air smelled heavy with memory, a mix of damp stone and something sweeter, like faint burned sugar. Cole tapped her recorder, and for a long minute the hum subsided. Then a second, distant voice joined the child's. Deep, gravelly, male voice. It cannot leave. The pulse rose, vibrating through the chamber, as if the earth itself had acknowledged his command. Shaw realized that the child's voice was not simply preserved. It was entangled with the memory of her father. The hum, the vibrations, the whispers, they were a ledger of pain, guilt, and protection, etched into the very soil and stone of Holcomb. It wasn't supernatural. Not exactly. It was resonance, memory, trauma, immortalized in the physical world. And yet, Cole, do you think it's aware? Shaw didn't answer. Her fingers rested on the damp soil, and for the first time, she felt the pulse of something almost alive. Then the earth groaned. A small tremor. Boards collapsed beneath them, sealing part of the chamber. Water sloshed over the edges. The hum dropped into silence. Cole tried to call the bureau on her radio. No signal. Shaw pressed her hand to the ground, listening. But the heartbeat had gone quiet. Shaw, the silence beneath. It's keeping them. They emerged hours later, covered in mud, carrying only the ribbon, the soil samples, and a sense of awe. Everything else was sealed. The barn's foundation was now a tomb, but one that hummed with memory beneath its surface. Back at the motel, Shaw laid the ribbon on the desk. She examined it, tracing the frayed edges, remembering the child's voice, the whisper, the word home. Shaw, it's not just history, it's her life and her pain, all recorded in silence. Hours later, she noticed an envelope slipped under her door. No return address. Inside, the child's ribbon. No note. A second paper unfolded beneath it. 2 words, scrawled in faded pencil. Return it before it returns you. They started demolishing a barn. They thought they were uncovering history. Instead, they had found memory, trauma, and a resonance that refused to die. The ribbon, the soil, the tunnel, they were a ledger of human fear and protection, kept alive by the earth itself. And somewhere, beneath Holcomb County, the hum waits, waiting for the next person to listen.